the last time I did this workshop, and I've only ever done this workshop once before, I had an audio issue for the first 5 minutes. So it seems like no matter how many times I do these workshops, there's always a button that I forget to press. So can everyone hear me? Okay, cool. Amazing. Okay, great. We're working this time. Okay, one quick thing before we get started, a bit of housekeeping. If you are watching this on your phone right now, I really recommend that you join from your laptop or your computer or a tablet or whatever, something with a bigger screen instead. We have a lot of slides where I'll be showing you charts, I'll be showing you data, I'll be showing you graphs, numbers. So you're going to want to see it in full screen so that you can make the most out of this workshop. So switch over to a bigger screen now whilst we have a few minutes before we get started. Okay, perfect. Super excited. Everyone is here and we are live. I don't know where in the world you are, so let me know in the comments where you're joining from. It might be early morning, it might be late night for you. Wherever you are, thank you so much for tuning in. I am currently doing this from Dubai. I'm here to speak at an event, so I'm just going to pull up the comments to see where everyone's joining from. Give me 1 second. Right. And your name as well. Okay, cool. Seattle, Paris, Belgium, South Africa, New York. Hey, Diana from Portugal. Hassan from UK. Okay. We've got people from all over the world, which is amazing. So with that aside, let's go ahead. Let's get started. If you're new here, hi, I'm Nisha. I'm a chartered accountant by training, and I'm also a former banker. I spent nearly a decade working at various investment banks, and about 3 years ago, I started posting videos about personal finance and investing on social media whilst I was working full time. I'm now the biggest financial wellbeing YouTuber in the world. I've also been featured in NASDAQ, I've been in CNBC, Business Insider, Yahoo Finance, and most recently, I was on the Diary of a CEO podcast as well. By the way, my slides are here, so I'm looking over here, the camera's over here. That's why I might be moving my eyes around a little bit. 8 years ago, I had my savings sitting in a bank account doing nothing for me. And I knew I should be investing it, but I kept finding reasons not to. Things like saying to myself, I'm scared of losing money. I need someone to walk me how to start investing step by step. What if I make a mistake? And when I finally started, I did make mistakes. I overcomplicated everything, and it took me 2 years to realize that I was doing it the hard way. So what I'm going to show you today is the simple path that I wish someone had shown me on day one from the start. And that's what I'm going to do over the next 45 minutes or so. And by the way, investing in personal finance in general is one of the most important life skills that will serve you for the rest of your life. So if there is one moment this entire week where you want to be fully present, this is it. Put your phone on Do Not Disturb. Close your tabs if you have any tabs open. We'll close the comments actually for a bit as well, so that there are no distractions. Just do what you have to do, but I promise it is going to be worth it. Cool. Here's the agenda. This is what we're covering. First, what to invest in and why it just works. This is the foundation. Get this wrong, nothing else matters. Second, I know you've heard of compound interest before, but when I actually saw the numbers for myself side by side, it changed everything for me. So that's what I want to show you. Third, a hack that will accelerate your wealth. And this is a hack that most people miss. This is where the magic really happens. Fourth, we'll calculate your freedom number. This is the amount that you need in your investment portfolio to never worry about money again. So we're going to calculate that number together today. And fifth, we're going to go over the biggest mistake I've seen people make during my decade working in finance and how to make sure that that doesn't happen to you. And then finally, for anyone who wants to take this further, take what we speak about today even further and wants to work together to implement everything that we go through, then I'll also share how you can do that right at the end as well. And finally, we'll end with a live Q&A. Cool. Let's dive in. Let's get started. First off, what to invest in. We're going in with the big question straight away. What should you actually buy? The question everyone's here for. Is it Tesla? Is it Nvidia? Is it an AI company? What's the next big stock? And when I first started investing, I was asking the very same thing. I thought that to be a good investor, I needed to be picking the best individual stocks. And that's what I spent all my time doing, all my free time doing. I spent hours researching companies, reading reports, memorizing financial ratios, just trying to optimize every single decision. And I thought this was the best way to do it. I didn't know any better, because when you're in banking, you're pretty much trained to believe that more analysis equals better decisions. But what I didn't realize is that in banking and in the financial industry, complexity is the product. The more complex we make things, the more we get paid. Entire careers are built around making simple ideas sound sophisticated, sound technical, sound out of reach. And that system, it works brilliantly for the finance industry because it keeps you dependent on experts. It keeps you dependent on paying fees. It keeps you dependent on second guessing yourself. And I was part of that system. And so for a long time, I believed that I had to apply the same complexity to my own personal finances too. But actually, the truth is that in personal finance and in investing, it is the complete opposite. The more complex you make it, the less you tend to make. Because complexity, it means layers. It means more decisions. It means more analysis paralysis. So I spent hours trying to optimize every decision because I thought that's what serious successful investors were supposed to do. And sure, I picked some good stocks. You can see one of them on the slide right here. And when they went up, I thought, I felt pretty clever. And I thought, good thing I work in banking. I can apply all this financial knowledge to my own money. But over time, I realized, A, investing in this way was a ton of work for me to pick the right stocks. And B, I could have got the same, if not better results from doing something much, much simpler. Because most of my investment returns, i.e. the money my money was making me, wasn't happening because of my decade of financial experience at all. It was actually coming from what the overall economy was doing. And I'll show you what I mean. So we're going way back now. This is a zoomed out chart, really zoomed out. We're looking at the chart of the US GDP over the past 70 years plus. And you'll see something that's very easy to miss when you're living through the day-to-day news cycle. And don't want to turn this into an economics lecture, so going to keep it broad. This chart, broadly speaking, it shows how the US economy, which is the largest in the world, has performed over time. And what you can clearly see is that despite the recessions, the wars, the inflation, political turmoil, market crashes, which is what all those gray vertical areas of the chart represent, despite all of them, the long-term direction of this chart is up. Not every year, not smoothly, but in the long term, it's been that way. And the main driver, or the main drivers for this trend, are productivity and innovation. So if you think about it, 30 years ago, if you wanted to start a business, if you wanted to start a business, you needed a physical storefront, you needed expensive equipment, you needed a huge upfront investment. Today, you can launch a business from your laptop. That's technology making things more efficient. Or if you look at how we communicate, from letters to emails to video calls, we're all on this webinar like this. This wouldn't have been possible years ago. Faster, cheaper, more productive. Companies that adapt to these changes, they thrive. And those that don't, they often get replaced. That cycle, that constant innovation and improvement in productivity, it's been happening for decades, and it's what pushes the economy forward over time. And you might be thinking, what does this have to do with investing? Why am I saying all of this? Why does it matter? Because it puts things in perspective. Investing is made to seem really scary. There's always another headline warning about a market crash or a recession around the corner. But if you tune out that noise for a moment and you take a long-term perspective, one that is grounded in the fundamentals, you start to see it differently. And if you believe that the economy will keep growing over time, just as it has for decades, then you don't need to be a stock picking genius or spend your year memorizing financial ratios. You also don't need to predict the next market crash or read company reports to be a good investor or to build long-term wealth. Maybe all you need is to own a small piece of the entire economy and hold it for the long term. That way, you can ride the upward trend. So how do you actually do that? How do you invest in the entire economy? Well, there's a really simple way to do it through something called index funds. Two parts to understand here, the fund part and the index part. Let's start with the fund part. So a fund is where a bunch of investors, so people like you and me, we pool our money together, and instead of investing alone, we all chip into the same pot, and then that fund invests on our behalf. So think of it like splitting an Uber, for instance. Everyone chips in and contributes, and you all get to the same destination together. So that's the fund part. And then you have the index part. An index is simply a list of stocks that represent a chunk of the economy. So for example, the S&P 500 is an index of the 500 largest companies in the US. It includes businesses like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Nvidia, these names that you've no doubt heard of before that you use in your day-to-day. So when you buy an S&P 500 index fund, you're buying a fund that automatically invests in all 500 of those companies for you. So it's completely passive. There's no person handpicking stocks behind the scene. It's just a computer algorithm that allocates your money based on that index. And actually, importantly here, your money is split according to the weighting of each company in that index. So when I say weighting, that means, it just means that some companies take up a bigger share because they're larger. So what does this mean? What does this actually mean for you? So here's what the weightings looked like a few days ago when I put these slides together. So you can see this is the weighting of the S&P 500 with the biggest the stars. Nvidia represents about 7.38%, Apple 6.09%, Microsoft 5.72%, Amazon 4.14%. So if I invest $1,000 or equivalent into a S&P 500 index fund, it will be split according to those weightings. So using those percentages and that weighting, it would mean that about $73 goes into Nvidia, 57 goes into Microsoft, another 60 in Apple, around 41 in Amazon, and then smaller amounts based on those percentages across all the remaining companies as well. And This is what the S&P 500, the US stock market, has looked like over the past 25 years. And because the S&P 500 represents the biggest companies in the US, investing in it is, broadly speaking, like investing in the US economy itself. And actually, if you look at the growth charts of both side by side, they move in very, very similar ways. Yes, the stock market is more volatile, as you can see here. It jumps around more because in the short term, it's driven by human behavior. It's driven by changing expectations about what investments might be worth. So you see more fluctuations. But over the long run, both tend to reflect the same thing, and that is the overall strength of the economy. Now, something important here, we've been using the S&P 500 as an example. That is just US stocks. And to be fair, the US has done really, really well over the past 15, 20 years. If you only invested in American companies in the S&P 500, you'd be pretty happy right now. They've crushed it. But it hasn't always been that way. So if you go back a few decades, there were periods where other parts of the world actually beat the US. So it was Japan in the 80s. It was the emerging markets in the 2000s. At different points, different countries or regions of the world have boomed. And honestly, no one truly knows which region will be the winner over the next 10, 20, 30 years. So if we don't know for sure, and we can't say for sure, what do we do? First, diversify. Instead of trying to guess which country or which region will dominate next, own all of them. Own the entire world. That way, whichever region wins, you win. And just to be clear, today we're mostly talking about stocks, but in practice, you'd usually want to add some bonds into the mix as well to help smooth out some of that volatility. So for example, you could have a portfolio made up of just 3 funds, a US fund, an international fund, and a bond fund. With that alone, you have already created a really solid, well-diversified portfolio. So that's the first way to protect yourself. Second, think long-term. When you invest for 10, 20, 30 years, you're giving your money the time it needs to ride out short-term swings and benefit from the long-term growth of the global economy. In fact, here's what investing in the S&P 500 over 1 year looks like versus if you had stayed invested over 10 years. It's a very, very different story on your returns. So hopefully that anchors my point from when it comes to long-term investing. Okay. Now, the opposite of index investing is called active investing. And when you pick funds via a platform, you can choose to pick a passively managed fund like we just spoke about, or an actively managed. And you might be tempted to choose an active fund because this is where, instead of the fund having a computer that basically passively tracks an index, you have a professional manager who tries to outsmart the market, picking what they believe will be the winning stocks to get you higher returns. And because they're not just copying an index, but they're actively spending time researching, they're spending time analyzing, they're spending time choosing investments themselves, they charge higher fees than an index fund. You're essentially paying for their expertise and all the extra work that goes into trying to beat the market. It sounds pretty good. It sounds great, actually, right? Someone doing all the hard work for you. But here's the problem. Well, there's 2 problems. First, picking the right stock is really, really hard. Even for the pros, the pros are people with Bloomberg terminals, with research teams, with models that cost tens of thousands. And yet, the data shows that over the long run, 9 times out of 10, active funds still fail to beat a simple, low-cost index fund that just buys everything.